as far as you have, everybody's business model is different. So my company's business model might be different than Denny's and Google's, and actually from a lot of the people that are out here, or other investors that come in from, let's say, international. I mean, that was a big thing that I think saved Miami, so to speak, in the last couple of years, was after the, falling off the cliff. You had all this investment from out of the country, other reasons for it, not just because it was, available and cheap. I think there's other reasons with respect to trying to have money to be more safe. I mean, the United States, as far as putting money here, is much safer than in other countries. So, these private developers had other incentives and reasoning. Our business model, we're long-term holders. We look at Class A, and therefore we're very, very selective of our certifications and what we're going to develop and what we're trying to achieve. So instead, Coral Gables to us was a prime location. It would be very difficult for me, going back to my company, going back to my board, going back to my investment group, to get development approved in Highlight. I mean, it's an industrial area. Let's use it as an example. So you have the corridor and what's being looked at. You're going to have different types. So every developer on the private side has a different incentive and a different position. But the certainty is key, and time is probably the #1 killer in most of the projects. My personal experience with the city of Coral Gables, out of the South Florida area, Gables, Miami Beach, there's certain cities that everybody knows. Let's just say it's a process. To get my first building permit, it took 14 months. And we basically missed the boat on the last run as far as cycle. We were ready to go. We were maybe, I'll say, 60 days from permit. Everybody fell off the cliff, and the plants went back on the shelf. It took us another 2 years to do some modifications. We went back into the city back in, if I remember correctly, January of 2010. With everything, minus slight modifications, that took 8 months. I just went in for my second phase, that took 8 months. It's very difficult for a private group to come in to try to do a development if the entitlement process, the land's entitled, I have the zoning, we're just talking the building permit, let alone the entitlements. So if the building permit process takes you over a year, I mean, you can miss a lot of things in that process.
Well, we'll talk about how we can improve building permit processing perhaps at another time, but let me go to a different question on the corridor. We know that the FEC corridor is about 100 feet wide, it's got a couple of tracks in it, it's got things on the side, it's got some places it has walkways and parks and things like that. What do you define as the corridor, though, in terms of development potential? Fabio, you said that your Gables project is 2 blocks from Metro Rail Station. How far from the center and the locations that the cities are telling us they'd like to have their commuter stations do you define as the development corridor for what the future development that would be supportive of that transit?
Okay. Not a simple answer to that question. The reality is, as far as walking distance, as they say, quote unquote, are you willing to walk from your house, from your apartment, from your condo, a block, 5 blocks, 10 blocks? I mean, it gets to a point where it doesn't become really conducive for, a commuter, so to speak. If I have to, in the middle of August, and I have to walk, 16 blocks to get to the train station in Florida, I don't know if that's going to work. So the other question is, okay, well, what's the connectivity from point A to point B? Coral Gables has a trolley system. It's a free bus that the city enacted that goes to 2 of their main corridors. It basically goes all the way up and down Ponds, from the north side down the mile, all the way out to the circle, and I think it connects down to UM now. So they created a little integral system, but it gets you to the final destination, which is 2 Metro Rail stations, one in front of UM and then one in front of Merritt Park. The people move over the Metro over in downtown Miami. it's a loop, and now they're looking at it because of the core and the density and the population now has increased, that, oh, we're looking to expand that, because I think they're starting to see, the reality is that Brickell is pretty much, I don't want to say built out, but it's you're there. Now the downtown development area, the true CBD is starting to get created, and then now you're looking at Biscayne Boulevard, north of American Airlines Arena, so you're starting to see that, and they want to connect to Midtown Miami, and then finally the design district. So they're starting to plant the seed and looking at the future growth and how it's moving. But all that's been established. You know what I mean, from a development standpoint. You're talking about this corridor, there's not a lot in that corridor right now that's truly established. That density to create critical mass to start really developing.
I think that the economists and the folks who are actually doing the grant work and looking at economic impact of mass transit corridors will tell you that a half a mile, there's a difference between the ridership issue, which is the walking issue, and the economic impact issue. The technicians will tell you it's a half a mile impact, economic impact on the outside of that corridor. So, for instance, when we were at the Fort Lauderdale DDA was working on the wave